Many of us love watching films that are the works of narrative filmmaking. These films are usually under the consensus that the characters and their stories are fictional. Therefore, we don't expect them to be real. But unlike narrative filmmaking, documentary films have a different consensual relationship with the audience. This is because documentary films are usually understood to represent a reality that is truthful. Therefore, giving us different expectations when we watch it. We hope to be informed with facts that bring us the truth. The truth. We believe that the characters and their stories are indeed real. And what I find really fascinating about exploring documentary films is how it can help us rethink our concept of reality, allowing us to have a better understanding of ourselves and others. For example, let's just ask ourselves, what makes a film a documentary? According to Sheila Karan Bernard, the author of documentary storytelling, she states that documentaries bring viewers into new worlds and experiences through the presentation of factual information about real people, places, and events, generally but not always, portrayed through the use of actual imageries and artifacts. But factually alone does not define documentary films. It's what the filmmaker does with those factual elements, weaving them into an overall narrative that strives to be as compelling as it is truthful and is often greater than the sum of its parts. Of course, this is just one way of understanding documentary films, and there are multiple ways to comprehend this medium. Nonetheless, Bernard's emphasis on truth and realness isn't unique, as many still view documentary films as a truthful representation of reality. It is an objective way of truth-telling by communicating with factual information. However, as we progress, the definition of documentary films have become more elastic. This is due to us asking more thoughtful questions regarding the concept of truth and reality. Concepts that usually play major roles when defining what a documentary film is. Some would say that a good way to define a documentary film is to ask what is not a documentary film. Often the opposite of a documentary film is regarded as fiction, fantasy, and perhaps even animation, as these are not representations of an objective reality. Rather, it talks more about the imagination. But what do we mean by reality in the first place? And what do we mean by truth in the context of the reality we are trying to represent? Sounds like a big abstract question, or rather, multiple abstract questions. Well, no worries. Let's explore these concepts through a documentary film titled Ryan. This film is based on the title of Canadian animator Ryan Larkin, who used to produce some of the most influential animated films of his time. But today, he is living in a nightmare shared by many artists, succumbing to addiction. He lives on welfare and panhandles for spare change in downtown Montreal. The film is a recorded interview between the director, Chris Landreth, and the animator himself. It challenges our understanding of what makes a documentary film simply by questioning our interpretation of reality and truth, and how it affects how we ultimately represent it. The most obvious way of the film doing this is through the use of the imagination through animation. The characters in the film are animated in realistic CG, but are seen as damaged. And Landreth's damage can be seen to portray a psychedelic distortion that represents the theme of drug abuse in the film, while also portraying his fear of failure that frequents throughout the film. It is portrayed as a literal entity of colorful strips that binds his head and face. Ryan, on the other hand, is missing huge chunks of his face and head. The metaphor is clear. The ravages of his lifestyle clearly have damaged him. But more sincerely, it can be understood that his art has, in fact, consumed him as well. One could argue that the director used animation as a way to represent themselves, as the camera would be unable to capture the internal emotions and expressions felt by both of them. This scene, for example, showcases the emotions of Ryan being consumed by his addiction, emotions that could not be represented or captured by the lens. But it is therefore communicated and expressed through colors and visual art. Perhaps this was how Ryan truly felt, and it's what the director felt as more real, quote-unquote, than merely using the camera to capture him speaking about it. Not to mention, subjects may also act differently in front of the camera. This may be why Landreth decided to only record the audio of the conversation and then add images and animation in afterwards. This may be Landreth's way of avoiding a camera effect, where participants might act differently in front of the camera by reacting to the presence of one. So by doing this, it allows Ryan to express himself better and perhaps more real. Of course, this is just a speculation. But another reason for using animation may also be to represent Ryan's memories. After all, it is impossible to record the past, but if that's our topic, how do we represent it then? And with animation, Landreth is able to use colors and images to include emotions in the memories, so the audience is able to feel what Ryan felt. This may have more effect than just looking at previous photos. But of course, this is merely an interpretation of the director, and he is representing his interpretation of the subject. And interpretation is oftentimes diluted with our belief structure and past experiences. How we identify ourselves in the context and culture we are in will be a great force in how we interpret a subject or topic. This makes sense as the moment you decide to point your camera at an issue, you, as the director, are already being selective of what story you want to tell and in what angle you are planning to approach it. Not to mention, your purpose will almost always make your decisions biased. No matter how hard you try not to be, after all, there is a relationship between the very nature of film construction and the way the mind makes sense of experiences. And it is often powerful experiences that produce a reality that supports their truth. As the director, we must admit that no experience is superior to the other, including ours, and that we are merely finding the best way to represent that experience. Therefore, we must always question our notion of truthful storytelling, as what is truthful in one reality may not be truthful in another. Different discourses produce different realities, some stronger than the other, based on power again. However, this video isn't about trying to define what a documentary film is or what reality and truth is, because that will be a bigger discussion that requires more time, more thinkers, and ideas. And perhaps there is no absolute answer for any of those questions as well. The purpose of this video though was to examine how exploring documentary films and its methods can help us rethink our concept of reality to help our daily lives. So you may be asking by now, how does this actually help me and why should I care about reality? Well, one thing to keep in mind is that in essence, a documentary film is a medium of communication. This is something I assume most of us do, whether we are filmmakers or not. And in many ways, our experiences and how we experience things affects how we engage with information and share or even represent it to others. This may ignite many conflicts as we all have different experiences, and in a way we live in multiple realities. That's why when we engage in a conversation or a disagreement, perhaps thinking as a documentary filmmaker may help. In the sense that we shouldn't be thinking about representing the truth and claiming a reality. Instead, maybe we should view it as trying our best to understand the realities that are involved in the topic or subject we are investigating or having a conversation about. And a good way to do this is to perhaps, number one, examine your attitudes and values when expressing an opinion. Number two, gain a better knowledge of oneself, as well as to develop introspective skills. Number three, develop better knowledge and empathy of the social world. And finally, number four, to develop deeper control of communicative skills. And this is something we all may never be perfect in, but it's worth a shot. For me, I too am trying my best to continuously reflect on myself and my reality and narratives and what I hold as truth, like my personal belief system, for example, to help me understand other realities better, and hopefully me and perhaps everyone can be able to create better relationships and conversations this way as well.